Aloha, I'm Stephen Bondsmith. This UHERO Focus video discusses long-term economic growth in Hawaii. On our website you can find a full article and blog, both linked in the caption. For the next 5 minutes I'll share my perspective on systemic issues in Hawaii's economy and a recommended research agenda to address them. First, let's talk about Hawaii's economic history. At one time, specialization in tourism provided for higher incomes and significant productivity growth. But because of this specialization, Hawaii's economy is strongly affected by any shocks to visitor numbers and the general performance of its tourism sector. And for the last few decades, tourism has been relatively flat. This chart shows tourism numbers and spending. Tourism in Hawaii was pummeled by the COVID-19 pandemic. But the pandemic is not the first shock to the industry. The 1991 recession, 9/11 and the 2001 recession, the Great Recession, and now the pandemic. Each of these shocks punctured tourist numbers and spending. As 70% of our economy, tourism's performance directly affects the state's economic performance. When the industry was growing, Hawaii's GDP per capita was higher than the rest of the US. But when tourism stopped growing 30 years ago, Hawaii's economy stagnated. In terms of per-person income growth, Hawaii has now fallen dramatically behind the rest of the US. Here in blue, you see real GDP per capita in Hawaii compared to the US in orange. The COVID-19 pandemic simply exacerbated this long-run trend of Hawaii falling behind. Hawaii's real GDP per capita is now 10% behind the US overall. When we account for Hawaii's high cost of living, it's even further behind. So, why is Hawaii so specialized and dependent on just one industry? And what can we do about it? First, let's start with why. Starting a tourism business is easier because the tourists are already here. The scale of the tourism industry makes tourism businesses more productive. And Hawaii's isolation exacerbates this specialization. It's not only the scale of the industry that matters, it's the scale of lots of different parameters that these businesses use. It's the size of the local labor market, the number of potential suppliers, the scale of local R&D, and many other factors. These are much more difficult to access in isolated places. And so isolated places tend to specialize in order to create scale in that industry, because that makes businesses more productive. This makes us better off. The initial expansion of tourism generated substantial growth that Hawaii's GDP per capita was 20% higher than the mainland by the early 1980s. But it also presents an economic development problem. An entrepreneur will have difficulty starting a business in a new industry. Even if many entrepreneurs want to start businesses in that new industry, they're each waiting for someone else to go first. And so everyone holds back from introducing new industries, or they relocate somewhere else to pursue those opportunities. It means that small and isolated economies will have periods of growth as they specialize, but they can fall into a low growth trap when their specialization begins to decline. Escaping this trap requires a strong commitment to establish a new activity or a range of activities, which is exactly what Hawaii did in the 70s when it invested in airports and infrastructure in order to expand tourism after the decline of plantation agriculture. So, what do we do now? When Hawaii chose to specialize in tourism, the opportunities probably seemed obvious. But how do we identify the best opportunities today? The key is finding new industries that are suited to Hawaii. Oahu shouldn't try to become a Silicon Island. We shouldn't try to mimic what other places do well. It's about finding the things that we could do well and supporting the capabilities for those industries. Firstly, research shows that economies grow by moving into related industries. Two industries are said to be related if they use similar capabilities. Establishing a related industry is much more feasible because it builds on the capabilities that we already do well. For example, Hawaii's expertise in hospitality could transfer to, say, rehabilitation in the healthcare industry. This would have very different dynamics than tourism, but offer a new source of growth. Secondly, we need to look for industries with characteristics that are uniquely bound to Hawaii. This is what I call strategic geography. These are industries that can only be done in Hawaii and very few other places. They have to locate in Hawaii. And so these industries are much more likely to generate lasting impacts. And thirdly, industries tend to sort into places which are the right size for them. Hawaii's economy is small, and so we need to find industries that suit small places. It's about finding many niche industries that might be still relatively small overall, but in which Hawaii has a bigger share. Figuring out what these opportunities are is a challenging task. It's not possible to learn everything about every new industry to know which work well and which don't. This means that no one can say what Hawaii should diversify into. Instead, the answers are revealed in the community. The diversification strategy is a discovery process by people with new ideas and deep knowledge about what's holding back the growth of those ideas. Our research agenda reveals clues in Hawaii's economy about the industries with potential. Policymakers and entrepreneurs can then take a closer look at what's preventing those opportunities from becoming stronger. We hope you'll read my research paper at the link in the caption and support our research at UHERO.hawaii.edu. Mahalo and aloha.